Hi, my dear students. Very good morning, all. Welcome back to Sri Ramanuja Vidya Mandir. Today, I am going to explain about the natural selection. Students, in the previous class, we have discussed about what is the causative organism for the causative factor for the heredity. That is nothing but the DNA. And I have explained about some evolutionary theories, Darwin, Lamarckism, and now today I am going to explain about natural selection. Students, you know, Darwin gave us theories of evolution, and as per the Darwin's theory, natural selection has been divided into 5 parts to explain clearly for the sake of students. Now let us discuss those 5 parts one after the other. Organism produces more offsprings than the actual survival. Actually, students, for the survival of every living creature in the nature, first of all, we should get support by the environment. You know, in the nature, we have 2 different factors, such as biotic factors and abiotic factors. Right? Biotic means all the living creatures will come under biotic, whereas abiotic means like water, soil, and all the natural resources will come under abiotic sources. I mean to say that, see, abiotic sources simply they'll supports the life on the earth. Understand, that's nothing but the environment. So, organism produces more here. Organism is producing the more number of organisms. So, it is beyond the limit of nature. Right? Every organism must struggle to survive as there are not enough resources. So, there are enough resources. There are limited resources here, irrespective of food, water and air and all. But here the number of reproduction is going to be increased years together. Right? There are variations with the species. Okay? There are a number of mutational changes occurring with the species. Next, some variations allows members of species to survive and reproduce better than the others. See, students, there are, mutations are of, or they are nothing but the variations, right? Mutations, these variations are of 2 types. Okay, beneficial and harmful. Right? Beneficial and harmful. Like some variations allow members of species to survive and reproduce better than the others. They are nothing but the beneficial variations. And the last point about this is organisms that survive and reproduce pass their traits to their offspring, and helpful the traits gradually appear in the more and more of the population. So in this way, when they'll reproduce, so obviously there is a chance of coming of new individual or a new progeny. So there is a transfer of hereditary characteristics from one generation to the other generation. In this way, so there is a spread of the all the changes, traits into the next population. Right? Now, let us study some example. Let us take the brown hair in polar regions became white hair. Will demonstrate each of the, see how this previous, the color of the hair is brown, but due to the evolutionary changes it turns into the white. What is the reasons why it has changed into the white color? Let us discuss those points. There are brown hares living in cold, snowy polar regions. Many of them were killed and eaten by the predators and the hunters. Actually, the actual color is brown color, students, but it is living on the white background. That means snow area, no, white background, obviously. Right? So hares were next. It is easily captured by the predators as well as the hunters. Okay, then hares were competing for the life and struggling to survive, trying to avoid the predators. So our hairs, so they're troubling like anything, and they're competing for the life and struggling to survive, trying to avoid the predators. It has to survive, right? It has to escape from the predators. Next, each hair was different from the other hair. One time a few hair were born albino, so the white color hair is, students, albino. Name is albino, and it is albino we got due to the mutational changes. Okay, mutational change, and the variations help the albino hairs to survive. Predators had a hard time to see the albino hairs in the snowy background. So in this way our hairs can able to survive. They can easily escape from the predators as well as the hunters. And in the following generation, more white hair survived and reproduced. Gradually the entire population was made up of white hair. So it's very slow process, students. Evolutionary changes in the sense, these are very slow changes. Okay, it may take few generations, it may take few hundreds of years, right? And so in this way our brown colored hair changed into white color hair, that is albino. It is one of the mutational change. Okay, if one examine the fourth point in the above example, one see the albino hairs have adapted to fit better in their environment than the brown hairs. This is nothing but the natural selection. So here excuse me, albino hairs are better fit to the environment and better fit into their climatic conditions rather than their brown hair. This is one of the natural selection. Natural selection. Understand? Okay. Right. Now let us describe about the genetic drift. What do you mean by genetic drift? Natural selection is the phenomenon where nature selects traits favorable to the species in its environment. So here in the case of natural selection, nature is going to select the traits, okay, in favor of environment. So if you examine the fifth point in the example, survival of more albino hairs in the population changed the color of characteristics from the brown to white. So over a period of time, I said no, it takes minimum of period, and these changes took place only in a small population of hair, those living in the cold and snowy regions. So these changes, especially in the very limited population of hair, that too those are living in the snowy areas. And there is an accidental change or mutation in the genes in a small population, even though these changes give no survival changes to the possessor. This phenomenon is called genetic drift. So a change in the allele frequency due to a what? Chance of event. So due to the change in the change in allele is genetic drift. Is, students, genetic drift. Okay. Now the elimination of genes of certain traits from the small population, when a section of species population dies of natural regions, it migrates to the other region called genetic drift. It alters the gene frequency of the remaining population. See, students, our genetic drift can alters the genetic frequency of remaining population. Can alter the genetic change frequency of remaining population. Understand? Next, let us study about the speciation. What do you mean by speciation, students? Let us study about the speciation now. The origin of new species from existing one due to the reproductive isolation of the part, it is known as a part of its population is called speciation, students. So let me give. So the origin of new species means the origin of new species. Origin of new species from the existing one due to reproductive selection. Due to what, students? Due to reproductive selection. Reproductive selection of part of its population is called speciation. Here organism is going to choose by means of reproductive selection, that is about the speciation. After few generations, genetic drift will accumulate more variations in each of two geographically isolated subpopulation, and that is nature selection will be also plays its role. In this way, geographically isolated subpopulations become more and more different from the others. Understand, students? Ultimately, reproductive isolation occurs between the individual of these two groups. So here reproductive isolation, it occurs in between the two different groups. That is, they will no longer be able to be exchange the genetic material between them. At this point, nature selection will work on the genetic variation within the population and until it has become a new species. Here the genetic variations is going to occur just within the species only. Okay, this is about the speciation, students. Here, there are, see students, 4 geographic modes of speciations in nature. So let us discuss those 4 different geographical modes of speciations now. First one, allopatric speciation. What is the first one, students? Allopatric speciation. Okay, here population splits into 2 geographically isolated regions and each population undergoes genotype and phenotypic divergence. Example, Darwin's finches. So examples are the Darwin finches. Here, students, population is splits into first 2 geographical isolated regions. So 2 geographical isolated regions. 2 geographical isolated regions. Understand? And each population undergoes genotype and or phenotypic divergence. Example, Darwin's finches. Peripatric speciations. Here, the new species are formed in the isolated small peripheral population that are prevented from exchange genes with the main population. Genetic drift plays an important role here. So here, genetic drift plays very important role, students, here. Okay, example, underground mosquito is variant of what? Coppens. And these are there are 4 geographic modes of speciations in nature. Let us discuss 2 more. And next one is parapatric speciations. Parapatric speciations. What are the parapatric speciations? Here, 2 populations are partially separated geographically. So individuals of each species may come contact with the other from time to time. But reduced fitness of heterozygote prevents the breeding between the 2 species. Example, Ensolitena salamanders are the best examples of this speciation. Next, sympatric speciation refers to the formation of 2 or more descent species from the single ancestral species, all occupying same geographical location. Example, see students, Chechils in the East Africa. These are the best examples of sympatric speciations. Let us discuss again these species, students. There are 4 geographic modes of speciations in nature. The first one is allopatric, second one is peripatric, and the third one is parapatric, sympatric species. Allopatric, peripatric, parapatric and sympatric. So let us discuss again. So these things are very tough to remember. Okay, once just listen the concepts very clearly, students. Now, allopatric speciations. Here the population splits into two geographical isolated regions, and each population undergoes genotype and phenotype divergence. Example, Darwin's finch. And in the peripatric, new species are formed in isolated small of peripheral population that are prevented from exchange the genes within the main population. So genetic drift plays very crucial role here. And example, underground mosquitoes is a variant of Coppins. Next, parapatric. Here two populations are partially separated geographically, so individuals of each species may come in contact with the others from time to time, but reduce the fitness of the heterozygotic, prevents the breeding between the two species. Example, Ensolitina salamanders. Sympatric species refers to the formation of two or more descent species from single ancestral species, all occupying same geographical location. Churchills in the East Africa. See students, let us see allopatric, peripatric and parapatric, sympatric. Original population. Okay, so initial step of speciation. See, here they were divided into two. Again, here parapatric, this will be ovulation. Next, evolution of reproductive isolation. So they finally divide, it will be divided like this. And new distinct species after the equilibration of new ranges. So finally, new species will be formed. Next, artificial selection. What do you mean by artificial selection, students? Right? Artificial selection is the process by which man selects the traits. In the natural selection, so nature is selecting the trait. So it's completely depending upon the adaptation shown by the natural living organisms in the natural selection. Okay, but there are some artificial selections. These are mainly done by the man-made selections. Let us discuss those. Artificial selection is the process by which man selects the traits which are useful to him for improving the qualities of, right, domesticated pet and animals. Here, new species have been created by domesticated animals. See students, here the new species have been created by the domesticated animals, animal husbandry. Example, reproductive isolation can develop and the differences in the species of the fruit flies after 8 generations using the different food type. Okay, next, other important technique is hybridization, students. Okay, here hybridization between the two different species sometimes leads to the distinct phenotype. Example, Marina Mallat. And the individual having the desired traits are selected and allowed to interbreed among themselves. This process is nothing but the artificial selection. Let us discuss. See students, I want a mango. I want to buy a mango fruit in the market. Mango fruits in the market. Okay, what type of fruits? Obviously, you'll choose. I want all my required characters. It is of good taste. Okay, color and fresh and big size. Okay, all these are the required characters. As a consumer, I want all these things. But see, there are different A type of mango and B type of mango, or there are two different types of mangoes are there. So A tree will give taste, and here it is going to give color, good color of mangoes. I want both the characteristics in the same fruit that is AB. So I going to be see cross between these two things, like that is something called hybridization. Okay, hybrid varieties. So in this AB, I can have both the qualities like taste with color. Okay, this is the hybridization. This is nothing but the artificial selection. Artificial selection. Understand, students? Just I want to give a small example to make you understand very clearly. Next, when repeated for many generations produces a new breed. For example, many useful plants like wheat, rice, pulses and the vegetables produced through these methods. So now and then farmers and agriculture scientists introduced so many methods like biotechnology methods, okay, biotechnology and genetic engineering. They introduced the new methods for the hybrid varieties like wheat, rice, pulses and the vegetables produced through these methods. So I think so as the population increases, demand for the food products also increasing. So to meet those demand, so here farmers as well as agriculture scientists, they're finding the new methods and new technologies to increase the production levels. Okay, the plants like cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli and kale are formed from the wild cabbage species. Okay, so like the plants like cabbage and the cauliflower, broccoli are formed from the wild species, that is the cabbage. Next, let us discuss differences between the natural selection and the artificial selection. What are the natural selections? It is a natural phenomena. Natural selection is simply, it is the natural phenomena and it is artificial process. The name itself giving a hint that it is the artificial process. Next, it is conducted by nature on a vast scale all over the world. So here the conducted by the nature on vast scale. Okay, it is controlled by man on a limited scale in specific laboratories. Maximum all these experiments are in vitro experiments. So they'll be carry out all types of experiments under the laboratory conditions. So they are so specific and limited. And here traits selected for evolution are beneficial to the species. See students, they are very much beneficial to the species. The traits selected by the nature are very much beneficial to the species. Okay. Traits selected for improvement are beneficial to the man. Next, fourth important point, results are achieved over a long period of time. Here we can get the good result, but it takes so much of time. Here it achieved over a long period of time. See, results are achieved in short period of time. Here the long period is required, whereas here the short period is required. So in this way we can compare the natural selection with the artificial selection. Let us discuss the points again, students. See, natural selection and the artificial selection. It is a natural phenomena, whereas the artificial selection is a artificial phenomena. And second point, it is conducted by the nature on a vast scale all over the world. So nature is going to select the required characteristics on large scale. Here it is controlled by the man on a limited scale in specific laboratories. I said no, these are the experiments conducted by the scientists and all. So they'll be carry out all such type of experiments in the laboratory conditions. Like traits selected for evolution are beneficial to the species. Here traits selected for the they'll be beneficial to the man. And the fourth one is results are achieved over a long period of time, whereas results are achieved in a short period of time. These are the major differences we can say about the natural selection as well as the artificial selection, students. Actually, students, in this class we have discussed about the natural and artificial selections. I discussed along with the examples. See, students, Darwin is the scientist. Okay, he laid the foundation for the evolutionary studies. And Lamarck, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck is one of the scientists. He also gave some theories which supports the evolution. Okay. In the natural selections, actually it is divided into 5 parts to explain the clearly how the evolution happens in the nature. Okay, organism produce more offsprings than the actual survivor. See, students, here organisms are able to reproduce new organisms. So then the actual survival. So reproduction means what, students? It's one of the type of basic life process performed by every living creature. So by means of reproduction, it is going to give the new individual or new progeny. Okay, already we studied in the previous lecture, okay, about the reproduction and all. Next, every organism must struggle to survive as there are not enough resources. See, students, for the survival of every living creature, first of all, we should get the help from the nature. The reason is that nature is providing all the required resources for the man, or not only for the man, for all the living creatures, like in terms of food, like water, air and all, shelter and everything. See, every organism must struggle to survive as there are not enough resources. See, if these resources are very limited, so obviously there will be a struggle. Okay, the struggle for existence will be taking place. So see students, for example, a room, its capability is just for 50 members, but 100 members are there. So how the room can accommodate all these people? In the same way, nature also like room, but it can accommodate only limited people. So it cannot accommodate beyond the limit. Actually, that is what happens in the ancestor times. Okay, so there are variations within a species. You know that what do you mean by variations? So there is the main factor which is responsible for the heredity and the evolution is DNA, deoxyribose nucleic acid. It is the material, chromosomal material present in the nucleus of every cell. All the living creatures are consist of the microscopic units known as cell, and cell is having the n number of cell organelles. Out of all cell organelles such as ribosomes, mitochondria, lysosomes, Golgi apparatus, endoplasmic reticulum, nucleus is the important one. So the reason is that the nucleus is having the very crucial material, that is the chromatin material, and this is chromatin material is nothing but the genetic material. We can also call it as a DNA and RNA. See, this DNA is made up of polynucleotide chains. So if there is any change in the sequence, leads to the mutation. Mutation can be defined as the sudden change in the DNA sequence results the mutation. Okay, these mutations may be beneficial to the man as well as harmful. So beneficial mutation supports the life in the nature. It supports the life to survive in the nature. And one more important point, I said no, nature should support the living creatures, and there are n number of adverse conditions and adverse effects shown by the nature, like floods, cyclones, the tsunamis and all. So the organism which having the capability of withstand all these type of conditions, and that capable organism can only survive at last, whereas the organisms which are not having the capability, which is not having the power to face all these things, they will be died. That is a part of natural selection, right? Next, some variations allows members of species to survive and reproduce better than the others. I said no, there are beneficial and harmful. Organisms that survive and reproduce pass their traits to their offsprings, and helpful traits gradually appear in the more and more of the population. So these traits means characteristics will be passed to the next generation. Let us see the example of how this brown hair is converted into the white hair in the polar region. So it is one of the evolutionary changes we can see in the case of hair that is present in the polar regions. Initially, our color of the hair is brown in color. Okay, so you know that polar regions means obviously it is the snow background. Okay, white background. So this brown hair can easily visible to the predators and the hunters, okay, by this color. So it can easily captured by the predators and it is easily eaten by the predators. So in this way, the population of the brown hairs is going to be decreased or reduced, and in course of time. Then what happens? See students, there are brown hairs living in the cold, snowy polar region. Many of them were killed and eaten by the predators. It is very tough for the brown hair to survive, right? Hares were competing for the life and struggling to survive, trying to avoid the predators. So every organism want to escape from the danger, right? Okay, it doesn't like to face a danger. Next, each hair was different from other hair. One time a few hair were born called, a new hair born called, that is albinos, white due to the mutational changes. These variations helped the albino hairs to survive. See, brown to white color hair, these white color hairs are known as albinos. It is the mutational change. Predators had a hard time to see the albino hairs in the snowy background, were able to survive and reproduce. So they can easily escape from the predators. So in this way, they are protecting themselves by this color. And so slowly we have seen the increased population of the white hairs, that means albinos. So in this following generations, the more white hairs are survived and reproduced, whereas the brown hairs are died. And gradually the entire population was made up of white hair. So slowly the entire population of polar region hair population became white. If one examines the fourth point in the above example, one sees that albino hairs have adapted to the fit better in their environment than the brown hairs. This is called natural selection. Let us study about genetic drift. What do you mean by genetic drift, students? Natural selection is the phenomenon where nature selects traits favorable to the species and the environment. Okay, up to this we are so very clear. If we examine the fifth point in the example of survival of more albino hair in the population change the color characteristic from the brown to the white over a period of time. This change took place only in a small population of hair, those living in the, see, that change means conversion of brown hairs into the albinos, that means to the white color, it is limited to the certain area. Okay, and those living in the cold and snowy regions. There is an accidental change or mutation in the genes in a small population, even though This change gives no survival advantages to the possessor. This phenomenon is called genetic drift. So a change takes place accidentally. That is genetic drift. Change in the allele is nothing but the genetic drift. Next, elimination of genes of a certain traits from the small population. When a section of species population dies off natural regions, so there will be migrates into the other region, is called genetic drift theory. Genetic drift. This alters the gene frequency of the remaining population also. See, genetic drift can alter the genetic frequency of the remaining population. Now, let us study about the speciation. Okay, origin of new species from the existing one due to the reproductive isolation of part of it's called speciation. So in the initial time what we discussed, that is the natural selection. So struggle for existence we have seen in that natural selection. Now here it's simply speciation is completely based on the reproductive isolation of the part of its population. After a few generations, genetic drift will accumulate more variations in each of the two geographical isolated subpopulation. Natural selection will also play its role. In this way, geographically isolated subpopulation become more and more different from each other. Okay, see, depending upon their geographical conditions, they have shown their variations. Of course, they are related to same species, but there are n number of physical and genotypical changes are exhibited by the organisms. Ultimately, reproductive isolation occurs between the individuals of these two groups. Example, they will no longer be able to exchange the genetic material between them. At this point, natural selection will work on genetic variations within the population and it has become a new species. Understand? There are 4 geographic modes of speciation in nature, like allopatric speciation, peripatric speciation and parapatric sympatric. In the allopatric, population splits into 2 geographical isolated regions and each population undergoes genotype and phenotype divergence. Here the population divided into 2 individual groups. Isolated groups, geographical isolated regions. Okay, one group going to survive in the one area, whereas other group is going to survive in the other area. Okay, so with the different phenotypic and with different genotypic characteristics, undergoes so many genotypic and phenotypic characteristics. Example, Darwin finches. In peripatric, new species are formed in isolated small peripheral population that are prevented from exchange genes with the main population. So example, underground mosquitoes is a variant of the pipens. See, in this parapatric, sympatric is there. See, this is the differences. Diagram is showing the differences between the allo, peri, para and sympatric. And artificial selection is simply done by the man-made selections. Okay. Let us see the differences between the artificial and the man-made natural selection and artificial selection. Natural means it is one of the, it is simply by the nature, whereas artificial means man is the main response, it initiates the selection here, and it is conducted by the nature on a vast scale all over the world, whereas artificial is controlled by the man on a limited scale in specific laboratories. Traits selected for evolution are beneficial to species. They are very much beneficial to species. Here, traits selected for improvement are beneficial to the man. Results are achieved over a long period of time. Results are achieved very short period of time. Actually, these are the differences between natural selection and the artificial selection, students. I hope you all understood the lesson. Of course, these are seems to be very dry topic, and so you need to work out. Okay, you need to put little efforts on this topic so that you can improve your confidence levels on this topic. So I hope you all understood my lesson. In the next class, I'm going to explain about the continuation of the same class, students. Okay, it is the very important topic, evolutionary, heredity and evolution, very important, interesting topic even. Understand? Thank you all. Thank you so much.